Okay, good morning, everybody. We're just waiting for people to join. Just a request that you mute yourselves. I've just muted everyone so that we don't get too much background noise. So for our speakers, don't forget to unmute yourself when you do speak. But everyone else, just a request to please mute yourselves so that you don't create background noise. Otherwise, it's very disturbing for the speakers and for the other listeners. So we'll give it till 10:05 before we start. Okay, so it is 10:05. I am going to, I think, start with our presentation. So thank you everybody for joining. This presentation session is focusing on budget advocacy and tracking, and it is the second of a series of webinars that we've been doing focusing on this topic with Thokozile Madonko, who is from the Southern Centre of Inequality Studies at Wits University and manages the public economy project there, and is also an activist, a poet, and a climate campaigner. And this is webinar series is within the Rural Action for Climate Resilience project, which is a partnership project between SCAT, SAFC, and with support from HBF and MC of Ireland. For those of you who are joining from the RACR project, nice to see you again. For those of you who are joining from the various networks that are not necessarily within the RACR project, welcome. The recording of the first webinar is also online if you want to look at it at another stage, but this will be building on the information that was shared in the first webinar. And at the end of the first webinar, or last week actually, we shared a Google form and asked for everyone to respond to it. And in particular, we asked different questions around what focal points around what level of government you would be interested in learning more about when it comes to budget advocacy and tracking. And then also what sort of specific topical areas relating to service delivery and relating to climate change would be useful focus areas for you. So I just want to go through those responses. My slides seem to have a bit of a delay. There we go. So we had 31 people responding, and you can see that overwhelmingly people were interested in focusing on the local government. So hopefully today that will be sort of a topic that we get more insight into. We also looked at the different sort of general areas, and we created these categories based on different budgets that were shared, or budget levels that were shared in the previous presentation. So the first one is talking about police, higher education, social grants. Then we have basic education and health, and then basic services, and then human settlements, which I think goes across multiple levels. And you can see that the majority of people are sort of focusing in particular on basic services, which correlates with the emphasis on interest in local government. And then just in terms of what are the climate change issues that we are collectively focusing on predominantly within this group. A lot of people focusing on food-related issues, gender-based violence and climate change, then water, and then flooding prevention, and then lastly, fire prevention. Okay, so I'm not going to spend much more time because you're not here to listen to me, you're here to but that's just so you setting the scene, and hopefully we can learn more about budget advocacy and tracking from Thoko. So over to you, Thoko. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I don't know, I see that many of you are from across the country, and if it's where I'm at in Cape Town, it's pretty chilly. So I hope you are keeping warm and dry in the winter months. And as Tara said, given the feedback from the little poll that we did, I'm going to be focusing primarily on local government today, and just really introducing you to some key concepts and ideas. So it's an introduction again, but building on the last session, as Tara has said. So I'm just going to share my presentation. Okay, can you all see it?
Yeah, we can see.
Okay. And you can see it in slide, or is it in?
It's not in presentation. Now it's in presentation mode. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so as mentioned, I'm Thokozile Madonko from the Southern Centre for Inequality Studies. For those of you that I haven't met before, I'm based in the Public Economy Project at Wits University. So the outline of today's session is, and Tara, if you can keep time for me so that I'm done in about an hour or so, like I will break it up a little bit with questions. The reminder is this a budget issue? So just to go over some of the core questions you need to ask yourselves when you're trying to interrogate the particular issue that you're interested in, for example, food gardens, permaculture, or early childhood development, or any area that you are grappling with, gender-based violence, whatever it might be. And then a reminder of the 4 phases of the budget, which is absolutely critical for those of us that are wanting to track the budget process and engage and intervene. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about South Africa's local government landscape. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about what Treasury has told us about local government allocations this year. So what's in the budget this year for local government? And then just some key local government documents that you need to engage with if you haven't already. And some of the questions that you need to ask is how we will finish off. So it's important to remember that not all public service issues are integrally related to fiscal policy or budgets. So some questions you could ask is, does the national, provincial, or local government provide programs or services that help to address your issue? So is this something that is squarely within the purview of the realm and responsibility of the state? If it is, then there's likely to be a budget question for you to interrogate. Does the government budget allocate sufficient funds to address the problem? So when you're looking at the provision of street lighting, for example, which is a key area of local government services and a key issue for gender-based violence in terms of making sure places are lit appropriately, do you have enough street lighting, or are there enough taps available in your communities for people to be able to access water easily and efficiently? So if you feel that there isn't enough, or that somehow the provision of these services is suboptimal or it's not great, then it's likely that they're not allocating enough funds, or the funds are not being distributed among the programs and services appropriately. So that would be the other thing, is to look and see, if they're supposed to be providing funding for textbooks, for example, are those resources being used to purchase textbooks, or are they going somewhere else? And then again, that becomes a budget issue. And are the funds allocated to address the issue actually reaching the intended beneficiaries? So again, if we have free basic services, which is what we are primarily interested in at local government level, the ability of indigent households to access water and electricity, a basic minimum of free services, are they actually receiving those free services? And are they sufficient for the needs of those communities? And this is a huge question for local government, and there's quite a lot of debate about whether there is enough resources going towards the provision of free basic services. So generally, I'm of the opinion that most issues have a budget angle to them. But it's always important to say, is this something that is the private sector's responsibility, or is it about regulation? So for example, when we're talking about environmental issues, there's this big focus on littering and, but very little focus on the role of big corporates to make sure that they don't produce that litter in the first place. And so whose responsibility? Is that a budget issue, or is that a regulation issue? And should government be regulating big corporates to make sure that the plastic industry is reducing its production of plastic at the point of production, as opposed to trying to get people to clean it up afterwards, for example? Again, what am I encouraging or wanting you to get involved in? And essentially, what we discussed from the last session is that budget research and analysis is the analysis of the budget. So revenue, taxation, borrowing, investing, spending, and public resource management. So it's about looking at the budget both at a macro level, but also at a hyper micro level. For example, just looking at what resources are what spending or investing is taking place in early childhood development, for example, or are resources going towards the maintenance of water resources in my community? So that's really what we're encouraging you to do, but to go back and have a look and see what are the sources or budget allocations or expenditures to see how they impact on a particular issue. So for example, is your municipality releasing or providing resources towards providing land for community gardens, for example? Or are they making sure that the environment is safe enough for you to be able to adequately grow food within your neighborhoods, for example? And also to analyze the plans. So are these allocations and expenditure enough? Will they advance or undermine your right to free basic services? Those questions are absolutely critical. You might even find that there's very little planning for food gardens at your municipality, or at your provincial level. So you might find that they're not even planning to release land or to provide the auxiliary services to enable communities to grow the food gardens that they need. It's also about analyzing revenue plans to see whether they advance or undermine gender equality. So we're interested in gender-based violence. We're interested in making sure that resources don't exacerbate gender inequality, but actually advance gender equality. So when we're talking about lighting, for example, street lighting, that has a huge impact on gender equality if there's insufficient street lighting, for example. or insufficient toilet provision, sanitation, can make it very risky for women to have to go at night to walk down a few blocks to get to a toilet. That can undermine gender equality if they're not providing decent housing and decent neighborhoods and settlements. It's also the analysis of revenue plans and budget allocations and expenditures to shed light on your particular sector, so what you're interested in. So if you're interested in food gardens, you want to look and track and see what is government saying about the provision of food gardens, about promoting permaculture, about promoting healthy environmental food sovereignty in general. Or you might want to look at a specific, as we're going to be doing today, sphere of government, which is local government. Or you can be interested in a target group, so children, for example, early childhood development has a focus on children in particular. So I'm encouraging you to also analyze the budget process itself, so public participation and the quality of that participation. So the right to know, issues of accountability and oversight. So even if you don't necessarily want to get into the nitty-gritties of the actual allocations and read the budgets itself, but you want to participate in the process, what is your experience? Do you know when to participate? Do you know what documents should be available and what your public officials are saying? And then, of course, monitoring the implementation of revenue, which most people do without even realizing, because often we are commenting on the quality. So if the school buildings, for example, have not been painted in the last 3-4 years, you're already monitoring the implementation, because there should be a maintenance program for schools, for example, in the budget at a provincial level. That's a provincial responsibility, for example. So I hope this gives you a bit of a sense of some of the kind of questions that we are trying to kind of unpack when we're talking about doing budget research and analysis. And you don't have to feel that you have to be an economist. In particular, I want to encourage you, I'm not an economist. I'm a political humanities student. But I've had to learn how to engage with the budget documents and to access them and to interrogate them, but also to actually go and physically verify what it is that we are assessing. So we've done work on free basic services, for example, where indigent households in Pietermaritzburg were not accessing their free basic allocation. And so we did a lot of work to see why that was the case, what could be done to improve their access, how we could get the municipality to properly register these indigent households so that they could receive their free basic services, and also to write off their debts that was being assigned to them. So it has real life engagements that I can say that would encourage you to engage with. So as I've said, it can be used to empower ordinary people to participate in the budget process by demystifying it. And you can take on that role to really engage, whether you're looking at national or provincial or local, to inform public debates. So what does it mean when we have a policy that is geared towards the provision of free basic services, but at a municipal level, the municipalities are using it for trying to just run their day-to-day activities because they're not being funded appropriately? How do we debate that? How do we discuss that? So that can bring about policy changes. So we've seen incredible work done by NGOs, civil society organizations, to bring about policy change in the grants sector, for example. So the child support grant originally went up to, I think, the age of 12, and that was extended to the age of 18. And so we've seen, enormous shift to say, and that was a huge shift in policy to cater for up to 18-year-olds. And of course, it's now being debated in the next policy shift around the social relief of distress for 18 to 59-year-olds who are not covered by the grant system, for example. It's also about improving the delivery of public services. There's some excellent examples of using evidence for poor service provision to hold government accountable. This has been done particularly in the water and sanitation sectors. Here in Cape Town, there was enormous work done on the Mshengu toilets, the contracts related to the Mshengu toilets and provision of sanitation, and the rollout of increasing sanitation for communities in Cape Town, for example. It also helps to promote transparent, participatory, and accountable budget processes, because you can use the information to strengthen and support full policies and contribute to oversight. And it also enhances the credibility of advocacy efforts. So even if you are primarily focused on climate change, by adding the budget dimension and the responsibility of government in relation to dealing with climate change into your work, it enhances and gives more credibility to your efforts. So in the last session, I went into some detail around the budget process. And so I'm not going to go into that detail, just to say straight off the bat, it's important to remember that South Africa is quasi-federal. We have 3 spheres of government: national, local, and provincial. This is set out in the Constitution. And national and provincial, national primarily is responsible for making policy and sets priorities through legislation, norms and standards, or political statements. They receive a share from the revenue raised through taxation. And that share is then also used through conditional grants into other...
Just before you come in. Yeah, just wanted to double check that the recording was back on. Yeah, and there are 2 questions in the chat. So
okay.
The first one is from...
Oh, yes. Okay, I see it now. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So how to get involved in the budget process, provincial government. So we're not going to be talking about that today, but it's very, very similar to the national process. And it basically mirrors by a couple of weeks, the national process. So what you do is you get involved at your provincial legislature, and you monitor from your department. So the department that you're interested in your particular policy area, or there might be more than one department that you're interested in. You then engage in the department and its formulation of its budgets, and there's some invited spaces, but sometimes you have to create the space by going to them to say, what are your plans, especially as was brought up around the medium-term budget policy statement, which is released in October. And we are interested in what they're saying. It's a policy statement, so that is a budget policy statement in October that tells us something about what the resourcing and thinking will be for both national, provincial, and local government, so it's relevant. So you can ask questions about how they're formulating their budgets, what are they thinking about at the departmental level. And then through the legislative cycle, they have to present their budget. So for example, they're going to be holding their budget speeches. Each of the departments will be doing that. So they've just been doing it at national, and now they're going to do it at provincial level, the budget speeches. And so you can find out what your particular department, what they're saying about their particular budget allocation for the year, what they're prioritizing. And then you can monitor your committee in the province. So there are committees for each department, and you can then, or each vote, because remember we talk about votes, and they will then, you can then see what they're asking of your particular department or vote throughout the year. And so they do the annual reports, the planning, the strategic plans, everything needs to be presented. And that should be available publicly, and you should be able to attend. You might not be able to participate in the sense of asking questions, but you can request to make a presentation to the committees. So we've done that. We've made many presentations to the various committees. If you're focusing primarily on the treasury allocation, then it's about finance. and you would then look at your finance related committees, your committees on appropriation, for example. So that's at the province level. I'm doing that very quickly, but we can go into it in another session. Are we going to monitor the spending of the budget at local municipal level, or will we monitor at community level? So that's really up to you. You have to decide how big you want to go, how targeted you want to focus. You can go right down to just focusing on your ward, which is absolutely reasonable. There are funds for wards, to understand what the resourcing is for your ward, and how that is then broken up to a particular neighborhood, receiving those services. So, getting involved in your ward committees, your ward council, making sure you know your ward councillor and so forth. But we'll go into that in detail. But you can also look at your overall municipal finances to see what the health of your municipality is. Is it able to deliver the services it's supposed to, its mandate in relation to what you are focusing on the service provision that you are focusing. Okay, so I think those are the main questions. And then Tara, your point about practical, I'll get into in the presentation.
Great. Just a heads up. So in terms of time, I think we're now at sort of 10 to 11, and I think we have until 12 for this webinar. Yeah. So just
we'll do some. I've got some breaks that I've tried to build in.
Okay,
like this
great.
one. Okay, perfect. Okay, so this might seem obvious to you, but if you're working on local government, you need to know your municipality. You actually have to know what kind of municipality you are in. So it could be a metropolitan municipality, which are large cities and typically have more resources and responsibilities. So they have more concurrent responsibilities. Like I mentioned, they roll out housing projects. They are able to raise loans to fund services. So they have a much bigger mandate than your local and district municipalities, which govern smaller settlements and rural areas. And a district municipality is made up of 4 to 6 local municipalities. And local and district municipalities share duties to cut costs and effectively use scarce resources. So why am I emphasizing this? Because if you happen to be in a district municipality, right, a local municipality that comes under a district, you need to understand what is your local municipality's responsibility and what is your district municipality's responsibility. And some are responsible for providing water, others are not. So some local municipalities can provide water, others it's the district's responsibility, for example. So and then, as mentioned in the picture, just not to forget, all of this falls under the province, right? And then of course there's national. And so we've just given a little example there of the 6 municipalities within the Chris Hani district municipality, right? And there's the district municipality is responsible for the provision of certain services that the local municipalities are not, and they share costs. So it's important for you to know whether you're in a metropolitan municipality, are you in a large city, or are you in a local or district? If you're in a district and your local municipality falls under a district, do you understand the different responsibilities of your municipality versus district? It's absolutely important. So just a reminder that local government has a 3-fold mandate. So it has elected leadership. So the elections for local government should be happening will be happening in 2 years' time, if I'm correct. And it also is representing local interests vis-a-vis other government spheres. So in theory, the representation is meant to feed up into the big national. So this is an absolute critical point, is that, you know, if you're talking about an issue like climate change, it cannot be just national government responsible for it. There has to be representation at local because of the experience of climate change at a local level, or biodiversity loss, or whatever it might be that is linked to climate issues. And so if your particular local municipality has a deforestation issue, for example, that should be fed up the system into representing the need for other kinds of economic development, so communities don't you know, have the resources available to them, so they don't have to deforest. I don't think that's a word, but, you know, cut down the trees. It is also meant to be inclusive. So this point about encouraging and enabling participation, consulting on the draft budget and service options. And these should be invited spaces. So where there's a call for you to come in from your elected representatives to engage on and a culture of participation, should be responsive to needs, and meet its reporting requirements. And then what we're all critically aware of is its service delivery and development mandate. So it's not just enough to talk about service delivery, but we also want to see people's lives improving. And as I mentioned, this is set out in the Constitution: basic services, planning, local amenities, sports facilities, street lighting, health, etc. And some responsibilities are assigned and delegated, and we see this primarily with the metros. They have more assigned and delegated responsibilities than a local municipality would have in a rural area, for example. It should place, ideally, community at the top, with the municipal council and the council committees, executive mayor or committee, advisory committees, and then you have the administrative official, the municipal manager, and the municipal administration. And these should all be feeding into each other to essentially support community development and service delivery. And there should be accountability from the municipal administration through to the elected officials through the municipal council. And the community should be able to say what the needs and policy direction should be and feed that through. So that's why those arrows. So this is an ideal. Like, this is kind of, if you want to understand your rights in the policy framework of local government, this is a very clear picture of what it should look like in policy. That's, I mean, in what the policy is saying. So to do our advocacy, we have to understand the local government context, and we have to understand government policies and priorities at a political and institutional environment, the administrative and fiscal systems, the allocation of resources, and the political systems and politics. And many of you, I don't have to say, know the political environment at your local government level. You know what's happening with your ward councillors, what they say, what they're able to influence, how the political parties play out. This all is part of kind of understanding the environment in which you're working. Then there's the legal framework, which we come back to always. There's the local government mandate, roles and responsibilities, the roles of other spheres of government, so what is province and national supposed to be doing, and then the importance of intergovernmental relations, so IGR. And then there's the oversight and regulatory bodies, and the most important one that we pay attention to, you know, one of the most important is the Auditor General. And the Auditor General has a lot to say about local government and the quality of local government. And in fact, most of our municipalities are effectively bankrupt. So we're dealing with a very, very difficult local government environment. The budget process, which is kind of where we're focused, where the money comes from, how the money is allocated, and when we say discretionary or not, this becomes important because local government has an equitable share that it can spend in the way that it sees fit to spend. So national cannot tell local government how to spend that allocation, but it can direct funds through conditional grants, and they have conditions attached to them in which it says, please, spend on this, on infrastructure, on housing, on whatever it might be. So some of it is discretionary and some of it is not. And when budget decisions are made, and when and how budgets and expenditures are reported on. So it's a really beautiful picture for us to be able to constantly find ourselves, so for example, now my local park was affected quite badly by the storm. So I would be interested to see, what's going to be the allocation of resources for repairing the damage, where will those funds come from, what is the city saying about disaster management, blah, 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 as an example. Again, you have the right to participate, so it's not a nice to have. So don't let any public official, either elected or not, or administrative official, try and tell you otherwise. You have the right in Chapter 7 of the Constitution, which sets out the objectives of local government, and public participation is an imperative of 2 objectives. So to provide democratic and accountable local government for local communities, and encourage the involvement of communities and community organizations in the matters of local government. So the white paper, which is the policy, remember I said we always start with policy on local government, defines developmental local government as local government committed to working with citizens and groups within the community. So it's very, very clear. Voters, consumers, service users, partners in resource mobilization. So your municipality has a responsibility in terms of the Constitution to ensure your right to participate. And there are other relevant laws, which is the Promotion of Access to Information Act. So you are entitled to information related to your local municipality. The Municipal Finance Management Act, which outlines ways in which community can be informed of the financial situation. So there is a relevant piece of legislation that governs national and provincial, which is the Provincial Finance Management Act, PFMA, is a similar document that governs national and provincial, so where you have rights to information is also there. And then the Batupele white paper, which aims to provide citizens-orientated customer services. So there should be integrated development planning, and within the statement of each new council, a new 5-year plan is developed. And that plan is one that you should be looking at and try and get to know and access. There's municipal budgeting, as I've spoken about. There's municipal performance management and public participation and citizen involvement. I've discussed that. Wow, okay. Now, if we were in person, the beauty is that we can be together online, but if only we were in person, I would take you through this poster. It's actually a huge poster that tells you and gives you, and what Tara was asking, the practical points at which you can get involved, at what point you get involved. So if I had more time and we were together, we could actually sit and write up, what is your issue? When are you going to, what are the dates? Let's look up, have they published them? Do we know? But essentially, you can get involved in your municipality's planning and budget process. And so I've just, for example, because we're in July, what you can engage is the service delivery budget implementation plan, which would have been approved within 28 days of the approval of the budget. And here, for example, you can track the implementation of projects that concern you and ask for regular updates from your councillor and municipality and relevant contractors. So that's a piece of evidence. So you take your service delivery budget implementation plan, that gives, you should be able to see your ward in that plan, or the particular service provision broken down, and then you can take it to your ward councillor and say, now tell me, you know, please can you report on the status of this particular on the SD for sanitation services. And then you can say, okay, if they're meant to be providing sanitation services or upgrading a particular road or whatever it might be, I can go and check, is there any work taking place? You can take pictures, you can find out who the contractors are, you can see if they're doing their work. So you can get involved in an ongoing basis. So I know that you can't really see the detail on your screens or on your phones, but essentially it takes you through the full calendar year of the municipal budget planning and budget process. And as we mentioned about evidence, you can collect information on the service that you're concerned about, write down people's stories and take pictures. We have phones, most of us, or you can have access to somebody who has a phone and you can take pictures. That's so important. You can record on your phone the quality. You can even film the contractors, you know, at work. You can build community support by speaking to people about your concern. So discuss it, come together. Say, if you're interested in, for example, air quality, you know, which is something that your local government and your provincial government are responsible for, then you can say, we're concerned about air quality in our you know, in our neighborhoods. You can talk to people who have asthma, what kind of chest-related illnesses that you're seeing in the community, speak to the doctors, build a campaign around needing to have the air quality checked, for example, or to release the information about air quality, whatever it might be. Attend ward and council meetings and make your concerns known. So again, these are spaces that we need to if you can't go, find out if there's somebody that you do know who goes, and you can ask them to ask the questions. So sometimes we're not in a position because of cost, because of distance, whatever it might be, to get to these meetings, but you might be able to ask somebody who you know goes to them. You can use petitions that are a big thing about if you want to improve street lighting, you can use a petition, for example, to get people in your neighborhood, or if you want, you can organize public meetings and invite your local councillors. So we call those invented spaces. So don't limit yourself to just thinking you have to go when they call or have a particular event. You can create the event. Arrange for a delegation that is representative of the community to meet with councillors and officials, and approach a local newspaper or radio station and ask them to write a story on the issues that concern you. So we did a lot of work with the example of the sports field. We did a lot of community-based work. We engaged with the community. We did. We had a fantastic set of interviews, and that's when it came up, the issue about young people and how they felt that this was creating problems for young people, in particular gender, and girls were getting pregnant, and now because they weren't playing basketball, this was something to make sense of how people are experiencing the lack of a service. So, you know, we just saw it as, okay, they're concerned about the misuse of funds, but actually there was a whole interesting dynamic around gender-based violence and gender issues that were articulated when we spoke to them, and we did a petition, and we had local journalists come and look at the sports field and to report on it. So you can really get practical examples of how you can get involved in the particular issue that you're interested in. So I wanted to throw this up for you to write down if you've got pen and paper, because this is an activity that is quite important that you can do after this session. Is, can you draw an organogram of who is responsible for the service in which you are interested in? And this applies for those of you that are interested at provincial or national level. Do you know at province who is responsible for delivering your service. Who are the elected officials and who are the public officials, administrative officials. So remember, there's a distinction between your elected officials. So those are the ones that we vote for. And then you have the administrative officials who are also quite powerful that are appointed through HR processes and so forth. But some of them are political appointments, mainly the DGs or the municipal managers. They're hybrid, and there's some debate about that. So, I don't want to gloss over the fact that these are not just simple kind of, very senior positions are often quite complicated in that sense. But can you draw an organogram? Are you able to say who has responsibilities for the service in which you're interested in? And then do you know the names of the structures? So the departments, the sections, the committees. So the example that was asked about the early childhood development is who in the Department of Monitoring and Planning and Evaluation is interested in social development? In basic education, because now ECD is under basic education. So, and who under that is responsible for looking at early childhood development at the DPME level. That would be an example of trying to track to know who the person is that you're interested in. Do you know the names, titles, responsibilities of people in key positions? Finding this information is sometimes difficult, but is usually needed to find budget information and influence budgets. So what I want to encourage you to do is to just write this down. So, oh, well, this is recorded and I'll make the presentation available. But I just want to take because I've been speaking quite a bit, just like a 2-minute break for you to think about this and reflect on this. And please don't worry if you don't know, because what that means is that you have now a set of new questions that you can go and answer. So I'm just going to leave that up there for a little bit, for a minute or two, just to let you think through your issue. And can you draw an organogram of who's responsible? Do you know the names of the structures, so the departments, sections, committees, etc.? Do you know the names, titles, responsibilities of people in key positions? So those are the 3. Okay, so that was just something for you to reflect on. And again, we'll make the presentation available. And I'll also send the, I just realized I didn't say it earlier, that I will send the PDF of this document to Tara and the team, because then you can, if you can access a printing, you can print it and see it in more detail. So this, I'll make the PDF available as well. So I mentioned the political structure. So what am I talking about? So the municipal council of ward councillors and proportional representation councillors, and the council votes on the budgets, bylaws, etc. Although officials may have a lot of influence, right? So this is the political structure. There's the speaker chairs and council meetings. The mayor heads the council and the executive and mayoral committee, depending on the type of municipality you're in. Portfolio committees are linked between administration, so the employees of the municipality, and the political structure. Okay. And oversight committee monitor portfolio and executive committee. So the one thing that is different about local government compared to when you see parliament is that the council is the oversight. They both oversee and monitor in a way, so it's slightly different. The administrative structure consists of employees who do the work of the council. The key decision makers are municipal manager, executive directors of directorates, and managers of departments. So they consist of directorates, departments, sections, units, branches, and the names differ across municipalities for both unit types and sections. So you have to figure out within your municipality how they refer to a particular issue if you're interested in free basic services, you know, where it falls under what unit. So we often say try and get cell phone numbers as well as landline numbers, as people often not at their desks. So it's tough to get a hold of people, as you know, but the more investigative work you do, the better you do, and eventually you can really build that beautiful organogram that you will need to be able to engage meaningfully with your municipality. So now I'm going to switch gears and I'm going to do a little bit of budget analysis for you, an example. And this is, as you can see, I've taken this from National Treasury. So I want to emphasize here that this is what Treasury is telling us about local government. And I will tell you what our research and analysis says about local government allocations. So you always have to interrogate what Treasury tells you. And sometimes it's not the full story, and you need to do a little bit of work to be able, as you know, to be able to get a fuller picture. So this year, transfers to local government account for 9.8% of nationally raised revenue. What does that mean? It basically means of the entire budget raised, so through all taxes and stuff, local government gets 9.8% of that share of the cake. Why? Why 9.8%? Because the majority of local government revenues are raised by the municipalities through their own revenue raising powers. Remember, I said they can raise revenue. Provinces can't. National can't. Well, I mean, it raises the big budget, but national departments cannot raise their own revenue. Let's put it that way. That's more accurate. So overall, direct allocations to local government grow by an annual average of 5.2% over the medium-term expenditure framework, which means over the next 5 years. And local government equitable share, the allocation, remember I showed you, to which it's discretionary, at an annual average rate of 6.1% over the 5 years. So what does that tell you? Now, they're saying grows. But when we look at the numbers and we look at this thing called inflation, which you are all aware of because you go and try and purchase bread last year, and what bread costs this year is different. And usually it costs more, not less. So things get more expensive over time. And also what is relevant for government services is population growth. So there are more people. So we've had both a growth in population, which means more need for services, and we have inflation. And we know that inflation is around 6%, right? This is what we're dealing with at the moment, a little bit lower. I think we'll see what the final outcome is at the end of the year. But essentially, our analysis, when we run the numbers through, we take Treasury's numbers, these numbers, and we run them. Essentially, local government this year is not getting an increase. Because if inflation is around 6%, it tells you if they're doing 5%, 6%, they're just in line with inflation. but not in line with population growth, which means there's more demand for services. So there's more demand on that budget. So they're not really getting a bigger pot of money. That's important for us to be aware of when we're doing our work on local government financing, is that the actual allocation at a national level is going down. So I've mentioned the local government equitable share. It's allocated through a formula to ensure fairness for all the 257 municipalities. And the formula has been updated for bulk water and electricity and for other costs. And the formula fully funds an estimated 11.2 million poor households. Now, again, this is what Treasury tells us. But in reality, are the funds, this is the budget research, my question is, they're saying we've designed it that 11.2 million poor households should benefit from this equitable share, of which is basically a 567 Rand allocation for a package of free services for a household with an income of less than 2 old age pensions. So that's what they consider million poor households. So a household of income less than 2 old age pensions per month. So essentially, if municipalities had enough money to fund their full responsibilities, 11.2 million poor households should be benefiting. But we know, as I've just mentioned, that they're not getting full funding for their functions. They're receiving less. And so it is a discretionary allocation. So the municipalities do not have to spend that 567.12 cents on those households. They can choose to use that money for other things because they might need it to be able to do other things. So there's been some changes to local government allocations, and Treasury tends to use very flowery language like reductions reversed and reductions adjusted downwards. It's all very confusing. But overall, the most important thing is that at one point they were going to reduce the budgets. They were going to slash the budgets quite considerably. That got reversed. So they maintained the original plan as opposed to the cutting plan. So people got a little bit confused about whether we were getting more money or less money or what was happening. And so in order to make funds available for other government priorities, reductions have been made to municipal conditional grants. Now, remember, I've been using the term conditional grants. What does that mean? There are conditions set for doing a particular thing. So the municipality has to spend that money on that particular thing. So they've reduced money towards the Integrated National Electrification Program grant. And don't we know energy poverty is an issue? And then they've reduced the indirect component of the Regional Bulk Infrastructure Grant. And don't we know that half of our water infrastructure is teetering on the edge of collapse? So not only did they cut the equitable share or reduce it or not give enough funds through the equitable share, they also have cut the conditional grants towards local government, which means there's less money available through the conditional grants for those conditional issues that are needed, like infrastructure, bulk infrastructure, and national electrification. So, and they've done some conversions, which is fine. You don't need to worry about that. And they shifted the Municipal Disaster Recovery Grant to fund the repair and recovery of municipal infrastructure damaged by disasters, which we're interested in. And then many of you might be interested in knowing that funds has been, for those of you that are looking at energy poverty, that 2 billion has been shifted for the new smart meters grant. So, and there are some concerns around how smart meters and metering works, particularly for water. Yeah, so that's a little bit of a background on kind of how local government is being reformed. So are there any questions on that presentation around the funding of local government before I go on to the last part of the presentation?
Yes, I do, Thoko.
Yes, please.
I just want to understand about equitable share. If I heard you clear, you are saying equitable share is for poor municipalities. But I want to understand now, equitable share is based on revenue that you manage to collect as municipality, or what determines it? Because I understand there is level of municipalities. So mine is level 2. So you will find that in Port St. John's, where I'm in, and Mthatha, the equitable share is not the same. So what it's determining this equitable share for our municipalities? Because other municipalities that is receiving this equitable share have so many businesses to rake a revenue. Then, like mine, we don't have businesses that we can rake more revenue to sustain the municipality. So I just want to understand about this equitable share. How does it determine in terms of level of the municipalities? Also, you talk about Ilendo in Municipal Structures Act and Systems Act. I think before we work with the municipality, we had to understand clearly about these pieces of legislation, because if we don't understand these two pieces of legislation, Systems Act and Structures Act, we'll have a problem to seek this information, or to promote or encourage the participation of citizens to this local government sphere. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Nomboniso. So the equitable share is a formula, and there's the local government equitable share formula, and there's the provincial equitable share formula. And then there is the equitable share formula for national, province, and local government. So there's a series of formulas that are all available, by the way, on the Treasury documents, so you can look at them. And they are determined by a number of factors. And that's why you'll find that different municipalities will receive different allocations, because they're looking at population, they're looking at poverty rates, they're looking at revenue raising ability. So that's why the shift, when they shifted the local government equitable share formula a couple of years ago, they shifted it. They actually did shift resourcing towards poorer municipalities. So the equitable share formula, the local government equitable share formula, goes to all 257 municipalities. So it doesn't, but it's designed and weighted in a complicated way to make sure that those municipalities that need the resources get them, that cannot raise their own revenue, and those that can raise their own revenue get this set amount. But of course, because of apartheid spatial geography, because of the legacy, because of the fact that the metros are huge, they can raise funds in ways that, and we have an unemployment rate that means that there isn't the necessary economic activity in many of our local rural municipalities to be able to raise that revenue. So there's still a question outstanding about the actual formula that needs to be addressed, particularly now that we talk about climate change, because the bulk of the money that municipalities are meant to raise is from utilities. So the idea is that they raise their financing from electricity and water. And we're seeing with load shedding, with a water infrastructure breaking down, that the municipalities, even if they're not even providing the service. I mean, load shedding, we're not getting electricity. So we're not, they're not earning an income from that electricity. And richer households, wealthier households who are able to are now offloading and getting solar and getting boreholes. So it's becoming a big question, the elephant in the room, essentially, for those of us that are interested in local government financing, is that the financing model for local government has to fundamentally change. Because it is clear that given the historical legacy of apartheid South Africa, and given the now enormous impact that climate change is having on our communities and the nature of our economy, we need a different model, because it's just not working. Our municipalities, most of them are bankrupt. They can't provide services, and so you're assuming that there's a revenue raising ability that just isn't there, and also revenue raising ability on a particular thing that isn't being provided, like electricity or water, depending on where you are, where there's infrastructure problems. And then I've just pointed out that they've cut the electricity and the bulk infrastructure funding. So that's a little bit more of the picture on the equitable share. It is. I mean, I can show you the formula. I'll send Tara where you can see. I mean, it's kind of a little bit even complex for me, but you might find it interesting. You can look at it. Absolutely. Policy. So legislation is critical. We need to engage with our legislation, and we need to understand what it is that government is saying they're promising. It's not unlawful to redirect funds, because it's an unconditional grant. So it's the best way to explain it is to say that the equitable share amount that a municipality gets is an unconditional grant. They don't have to. The Treasury in some way is trying to get them to fund, and they should be funding poor households, but they also have other mandates. So we've seen that there's pressure on, if people are honest and Treasury is honest, they know that there are pressure on these municipalities to deliver multiple services in a context of shrinking budgets. And so it's not unlawful for them. So, I mean, it would be interesting if they were to say, let's make it a conditional grant, that the free basic service becomes a conditional grant. That would be interesting. I mean, it's not an impossibility. That could be a possibility. They could do that, but it's not unlawful. What is unlawful, interestingly enough, and this is where the budget work comes in, is the lack of provision of the service. So by failing to provide free basic services, that's unlawful. So the municipality would have to justify why it redirected the funds, or explain how they are, what it is that is preventing them from being able to make sure that indigent households are receiving their free basic. But what has happened is municipalities have made it quite difficult for households to qualify, and to access the free services. So that's also what we found in our work in Pietermaritzburg. They just weren't registering people. So they were saying we've only got 5,000 indigent households, even though it's known that there was 20,000, for example. I'm just throwing those numbers out. So that is an interesting angle. And that's where your budget work comes into it, in terms of the analysis. Okay, so the last little bit is just some of the key documents, and you can find them on the Treasury website. and that's the link. So if you're interested, it's incredible. I did some work with a couple of municipalities, and I went to one of the municipalities I was training, and I pulled out their budget, and some of the municipal officials had not seen their budget, and they were like, "Where did you get this from?" I said, "From the Treasury website." It's there. So there is information. Treasury does provide information, and this is where you can access the documents. So it's important. So we all know about the IDP, or we're learning about the IDP, or we're going to go and read our IDP. It's the 5-year development plan, but it's rolling. So it is updated every year. And it's meant to be developed in a participatory manner, and it outlines how the budget will be spent and the priorities. And it states in which areas and which projects will be implemented, and covers both service delivery, so operating expenditure, and infrastructure, which is capital expenditure. So in budget speak, operating expenditure, day-to-day expenditure, and infrastructure is your more solid, kind of think of it as capital. So like others, it's a very long document, and you can use Control F, or you just focus in on your area that you're interested in. You don't have to read the whole document. You can skim it and look for what is relevant for your particular issue. The Service Delivery Budget Implementation Plan, it's similar to the IDP, but covers only 1 year. And it shows what is planned for the budget year. So remember, I said now in July, it should be done. You should be able to access it now, and you can look, and explains how it will measure its progress. So what is going to be provided when. So I encourage you, if you can, to access these documents. And if you need help, just send me an email and I'll help you to access the documents. So I'm available. Because it's really a critical part of this work is engaging with these documents. Then the municipal budget, which people tend to like, where their eyes blur over, and it's lots of numbers, as you can see in the picture. So it details where the municipality will get the money and how much, so the revenue. It details how municipality will spend its budget expenditure. And it includes tables showing money amounts plus the narrative. So it tells you why that amount of money and what it's for. So it's you can understand better, it's not just numbers, there is a narrative. It must be tabled in council and voted on before financial year begins on the 1st of July. So we've missed the budget year, influencing the budget for 2024, but you can get ready for next year when the process starts. And it shows 3 years, but the council only votes on the first year. And why do we say vote? It is a money bill. It becomes a piece of legislation. It is voted on by the political parties in the council, and it becomes law. So if they say they're going to spend 567 Rand per household, qualifying what, then it becomes law. Then it becomes an interesting question of, if they're not spending that, then they could be breaking the law, if it's in the budget. And this is where it becomes so important, because if it's not in the budget, then they don't have to spend it that way. So the key parts of the budget that you're interested in is the operating budget for recurrent spending. So on people, on goods and services, on toilet paper, these things that are recurring, that happen. And then the capital budget for non-recurrent spending. So that's your buildings and your roads and so any kind of solid structure there's often a little bit of debate about where maintenance falls, whether it falls under capital or operating. So maintenance can sometimes be under capital, or it can be under operating. And there are two sides to any budget. So there's the revenue, where the money comes from, and expenditure is where it will be spent. So when we look at the budget, your municipal budget, you're looking at operating capital, how they're going to raise the money for capital, how they're going to raise the money for operating, how they're going to spend the money, for capital, how they're going to spend the money for operating. So that's your 4 sides. So I've put a few that I won't go into now, just the budget talk things that you can engage with around revenue, expenditure, budget surplus and budget deficit, overspending, underspending, and trade-offs. So when you get an opportunity, after this, you can read up about that. So the sources of operating revenue, as I mentioned, is service charges, so electricity and water, property rates, businesses and households, and operational transfers from national government. So remember, I said that national government can sometimes provide funds. And other own revenue is traffic fines, rental income, and so forth. And then I've mentioned this, the equitable share is an important operational transfer. It is meant to cover, among others, the cost of free basic services, but the council can choose how to spend the fund. Okay, so that's what we've discussed. The sources of capital revenue are government grants, mainly from national government. Borrowing, this is mainly your big metros that do this. Internally generated funds, so from past operating surpluses, if they managed to balance their books and they had a little bit of money. Local or foreign public contributions and donations. And the capital grants are usually conditional grants, which can be used only for the purpose for which they were given. Okay, and this is different from the equitable share, for which the council has full decision-making power. So I'm just reaffirming that. So the thing to remember is, for those of us that are interested in the climate financing questions, especially when we're looking at infrastructure or capital revenue, we want to track those financing, the climate finances, right down to our local municipalities. Okay, expenditure is classified by type. So for operating or project for capital, and by standard classification, so sanitation, electrification, or by vote as well. And the key types of operating expenditure are employee-rated costs, remuneration of councillors, finance charges, interest on loans, bulk purchases, contracted services, transfer and grants. And these are not the only types of operating expenditure. So we also know that from the bulk purchases for electricity, Eskom, and water, that many municipalities are in debt to Eskom. And they've written off some of this debt just recently. They wrote off some of the most indebted municipalities. So they're not even necessarily spending on those purchases. And this is just an example of how they can do it in terms of categories, so that you know what you're looking at. So trading services is usually electricity, water, wastewater management, waste management, but it depends on your municipality. They are trying to standardize it through what's called MSCO, the municipal standard, MSCO, the standard something on accounts. So they're trying to standardize it, but it's still different. So from one municipality to another, they might, and the big metros, they all do it slightly differently. And then we talk about votes, remember, because they are deciding on each of the votes. Yeah, and then again, these will depend on your municipality, and they differ across municipalities. So finally, I just want to, before we have some time for open conversation and thoughts, and is to really think about, ask questions. So I really want to encourage you to take action on the budget. So participate in the budget process, monitor the quality of services in your community, see how much money your municipality receives and where it comes from. Read council minutes, progress, or annual reports, compare them to your experience of service delivery, attend council and quarterly ward meetings. And then when you're thinking about at the local level, you have to think about one thing that's unique and it's not as easy to do at province and national, is that you have your full direct ward councillor who should be responding to you. And is your ward councillor fulfilling election promises? Does your ward councillor regularly visit to listen to the community? I mean, my ward councillor, for example, has a WhatsApp group, so feeds information and updates through the WhatsApp group. Does your ward councillor take up the community's concerns with the council and municipal administration? Does your ward councillor report to your community about the work of government and what is happening in the area? Is your ward councillor helping you to talk to provincial government about services that are shared with municipalities? For example, health, education, housing. So these are the kinds of things that I really want, and you'll see that when you get the poster, is on the poster to encourage you to really see that you can get engaged. And it takes stop and start, and you might have to try a few times a different tactic, try something else. But the key thing is to really get involved, start participating, even if it's just the first thing you do after today is you access your IDP again and look at it, or access your municipal budget and look at it, just to familiarize yourself with the information. Or like Nombaniso was saying, maybe read the acts, go back to the white paper. What have we said about the goals of local government? What does the Constitution say? You can even read the Constitution and see what it says. Okay, so that's just to show you an example of a budget, and it will have a narrative. And yeah, again, create more possibilities. You'll see that this is my favorite thing to finish off with is, for us to be able to change our community's experience of government and government services, we need to create more possibilities, and like this one. So it's great that SAFC provides the space for someone like me who normally sits looking at budgets and not really getting to engage that much with communities. It's a great opportunity to think about how we want to shape tomorrow towards abundance, exploring partnerships, drawing on unexpected strategies, asking different questions. So again, who is the center of your story of change? Who is missing? What other possibilities are there? So what is your top insights? What is the most straightforward thing you can do? And what are you taking away from this session? What worked well, worked less well, other comments. So let's open up for conversation. We've got 15 minutes.
I have a few questions, but I think that maybe I'll wait and see if there's anyone from the floor who wants to ask first, and then if not, then I'll come in.
Did I miss anything in the chat? I think I covered it, yeah.
No,
Okay.
No, yeah.
I must try. I want these questions. My top insight from today is that evidence-based budget advocacy that can be used, especially on the second last one that says promote more transparent, participatory, and accountable budget process. I like that one because it's where we enter. It's where we encourage even the citizens to join us. It's where it capacitated us to participate in this budget advocacy process of our local municipalities. Also, I'll go to question 3. I'm sorry. What I'm taking away here, that phases, those phases is clear to us, in fact, to me, because I know now what is the process of the budget, but Thoko said it's important for us to participate to all phases. So I will take it that, so that I can, because it's a learning curve also to really to be on 4 phases. And I think for me, this time around, Thoko, first day, it was something like, this is too diplomatic or heavy for us. But now it's maybe it's the second day. Maybe I'm not sure. For me, it's too informative, starting from the day one. The information that I receive today, it's backing up for that one on part 1 of the training. Really, for me, it's working. I'm looking forward in participating and making sure that my municipality, I understand this local government sphere, because is the sphere that is nearer to my heart and even to my communities, is the sphere that is affecting us directly in our communities, especially in Port St. John's as a rural area of our Tambo White Coast. We are too far. In terms of service delivery, is the area that is experiencing the poor service delivery. Even accessing to deliver these services that we are doing as advice office is not easy to access in other areas because of poor services on those areas. So for me today, really, it was my day, and I didn't experience any network problem as the first day, because I was reliable on that the link that you send about the day. So for today, for me, really, it was interesting, and thank you.
Thanks so much, Nonkulisa. There's a question here about when a ward councillor is not reporting to the community, what steps should be followed to get update with council resolutions. So there you would want to try, if your political representative is not feeding back to you, then you would try to access the administrative. So the person who's responsible for keeping the minutes, there's always an administrative person that you could try and access that information. Yes, there is meant to be what they call transfers to households, money for supporting organizations, and the best way is to get a hold of your budget, find out where that money sits with which directorate, and then you'll be able to know who to write the proposal to or who to engage with to try and access those funds, especially when you're looking at climate change. So yes, there are funds available for community engagement and support. Yeah. Okay, yeah, accessing, exactly, as I've said. So if you can't access your local, you can't access, yeah, I think you'll meet your local ward councillor, if I understand correctly. Oh yeah, no, sorry, your municipality is based at Maclear. then the key there would be who is based at Maclear that you can partner with, who can help you to access the information. So can you set up a WhatsApp group with people who are able to get that information? So yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, Toko, I think that might have been a direct message to you. Could you just share what the
So it was just basically saying that we need to engage our local municipality, so we're aware of the budget, but it will not be easy for us at the moment since our local municipality is based at Maclear, so they're not based where their municipality is based, which is a real struggle. So you have to, that's where partnerships become so important, because we recognize that yes, participation costs, you know, it's not something that doesn't do. Okay, and your questions, Sarah?
You did just answer the Sophila's question here around the local government supporting organizations, or did you?
Yes.
Yeah. My question was more, it's around the IDP and sort of how much detail is expected to be included in the IDP, because I understand, yeah, that you also then have the SDVIP and then you have the municipal budgets. So how, yeah, when we're saying that we should be calling out municipalities if they're not doing adequate planning, sort of what are our standards to call them out?
So it would depend on how convincing you find the IDP. So that would be one, just generally, like, does this sound like a good plan? But then if you're interested in a particular directorate, you would try and access the directorate level documents as well. So not just the IDP and the SDPIP, each of the directorates, each of the sub, they have their own planning documents and stuff that you can access. And so you want to go into into the level of detail that you need to for your particular issue that you're interested in, that you're focusing in on. But generally, the IDP should be convincing. You should read it and go, yeah, this makes sense. Like, this will, and if it doesn't, then that's, you can say this, given important things like, if you're interested in food production, for example, then you know what changes are happening in the environmental, in the climate environment that's affecting food production in your neighborhood. Does the IDP make mention of climate change? If it doesn't make mention of climate change, then it's a bad plan, because already that the climate is changing, the rains are changing, there's more drought or whatever it might be, floods, fires. Yeah.
I had some other questions, but I don't know if anyone else wants to come in before I.
Hi, Tyra.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, good morning, all. I don't know if I've missed it, but I also have a question around the IDP. When it comes to the IDP, who does where does public participation sit? Is it important, or is it a must, or is it compulsory for the community to be part of drawing up or prioritize the IDP plan? Because I am on the ward committee, and what they do here in the Cedarburg area is that they only bring the ward committee together, and where whatever sector you in, you must almost like get the points from your area and then put the points on to the development plan. But I don't feel it that we are reaching everybody. There was a question just now, if the ward committee doesn't, or the ward member of the committee doesn't report back to the community, what can they do? And in my area, we do get together with the community, but the community isn't part of the integrated plan. You understand what I'm saying? So I want to know, must the community be part of it? Isn't it important for them to be a part of it?
Yeah, so absolutely. So you might have missed the part that I mentioned around the right to participation. So it's built in, it's baked into the constitution and into the local government legislation that there must be participation. So it's not a nice to have, it's not a, just talk to 3 people and you can tick a box. No, they must be full, comprehensive, and different sectors of society should be engaged with as well. So it's quite specific about making sure, and it's within the different legislation, and then even the Municipal Finance Management Act talks about the kinds of financing information that should be made available to communities to be able to participate. So it's absolutely, you're correct, that there needs to be very creative thinking around engaging communities in innovative ways. And there's so many interesting models that are being tested globally around getting people to be able to really give meaning to this idea of participatory democracy and what that means. And at the moment, we have a very archaic kind of system of participation that doesn't really enable us to reach communities in a meaningful way. So yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But we can do it sector by sector. We can do it as we influence in the area that we are interested in, and partner up with those that are interested in other sectors. So, we don't have to do everything, but, we can really make sure that in our corner, we are fulfilling that box. We're really filling that box and making sure we're reaching in relation to our particular issue, or you don't want to spread yourself too thin. You've got to be realistic about what you can do, but that doesn't mean you can't partner with other organizations looking at other issues. So for example, people who are looking at energy poverty and domestic violence, around street lamps, for example, can be a very interesting. Yeah. Cool. I think that's it. That we come to the end. Are there any other questions?
I just this is more of a general question because it's not yet been signed. But with the climate change bill, there are certain implications for municipal planning around climate change. And the expectation is that it will eventually be signed and become an act. So I was wondering if from what you've seen in the sort of National Treasury, the allocations and sort of the more latest budget work, whether that's reflected at all, or whether, what your expectations would be for sort of that to be reflected in the future.
There's a lot of work being done within Treasury around. They've just had a big thing around climate change, actually, as Treasury. So they are signaling that this is of interest. And so and they're doing climate tagging, which is looking at funding that they can say has a climate effect, or it contributes to addressing climate issues. And there's some critiques about tagging because it's also done for gender responsive budgeting. So there's some concerns around tagging. So it'll be interesting to see how they make and integrate the ways in which they talk about financing from the mitigation adaptation perspective. How they're going to be able to show that this relates to mitigation, this relates to adaptation, this so all the stuff that they loss and damage, like the kind of where the funds are needed for loss and damage. So I think it's still early days for me, at least, in looking at this, but there might be more more information than I'm mentioning at the moment.
Well, I think we've come to 12, but this was such a really, educational, informative session, and feel like, again, we've only just scratched the surface. So I think moving forward, we'll hopefully try and continue engaging with you in different ways, and maybe see if we can, bring you to more workshops, maybe have some more time in person with you. But that's a conversation that will continue after this. But yeah, I just want to really thank you for taking the time, and just huge appreciation from all of us for doing this work and sharing your insights and knowledge.